What happened when I asked the quiet waitress for a drink, thinking she wouldn't understand? She responded in perfect Spanish and I was stunned. That one moment pulled me into her world, a world I never expected to be part of. I soon learned her family was in grave danger, caught between a violent gang and survival. What happened next? I had to choose. Leave her to fight her battle alone or risk everything to save her. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling twists and emotional moments. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what happens next. Your support means the world. The high-profile charity gala was in full swing, with glittering chandeliers casting soft light over the ballroom as the city's wealthiest mingled, laughing and clinking glasses. Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, stood at the center of it all, a polished figure of power and influence. Known for his ruthless business practices, he had built his empire through sharp decisions and cold calculations. Yet, hidden beneath his stern exterior was a deep respect for his family's legacy. The company his grandfather had founded, now an untouchable titan in the industry. The night was meant to be a celebration of their success, but for Ethan, it was just another evening spent surrounded by empty pleasantries. As he made his way through the room, his eyes caught sight of a young woman, Maria Lopez. She was working the gala as a part-time waitress, serving drinks to the high-profile guests, her expression calm and focused. Maria, in her simple black dress and apron, appeared out of place in the sea of opulence that surrounded her. Yet, there was something about her quiet confidence that caught Ethan off guard. While others were distracted by their own conversations, Maria moved with an ease and grace that suggested she didn't belong in the background. Curiosity piqued, Ethan observed her from a distance. Despite the fact that she was in a lowly position at the event, she didn't appear intimidated. Her gaze, though often cast downward, was steady, and she seemed unbothered by the luxury and extravagance around her. For a moment, Ethan forgot about the endless demands of his empire. There was something magnetic about her, something that made him want to know more. As he approached the bar, his hand raised to signal for a drink, he was struck by the fact that Maria was the one serving him. When he made eye contact, he offered a brief smile. "Una copa de vino tinto, por favor," Ethan said, assuming she was just another worker who wouldn't understand English. It was a habit he often fell into when speaking to staff. His Spanish was rudimentary, but it was often the best way to communicate in a setting like this. To his surprise, Maria looked up at him, her eyes locking with his, and responded effortlessly in perfect Spanish. "Claro, señor, enseguida," she said, with a soft but confident tone. Ethan blinked in surprise, not expecting to be met with such fluency. It wasn't just the fact that she spoke Spanish, it was the way she said it, the way she held his gaze with calm assurance. It was as if she didn't see him as the powerful billionaire standing before her, but simply as another person. He stared at her for a moment longer than was polite, his mind racing. "You speak Spanish?" he asked, a little taken aback. Maria gave him a small, polite smile as she began preparing the drink. "Sí, señor. I'm originally from Mexico," she replied, her tone unbothered, though there was a faint hint of pride in her voice. Ethan found himself captivated. He had assumed she was just another face in the crowd, someone too far removed from his world to make a lasting impression. Yet, in that brief moment, something about Maria challenged everything he thought he knew about people like her, people who lived outside his bubble of wealth and privilege. As she handed him the glass of wine, their fingers brushed, a brief electric touch that left him momentarily speechless. For a brief second, he thought he saw something deeper in her eyes, a flicker of something that suggested she wasn't just the quiet, humble waitress everyone assumed her to be. He stepped back, still holding the glass, watching her as she moved on to her next task. His mind, however, was no longer on the gala or the important guests. All he could think about was Maria, the woman who had stunned him with a single conversation. The night at the gala continued, but Ethan's mind was no longer on the crowd or the conversation swirling around him. His thoughts kept drifting back to Maria, the waitress who had caught him off guard with her grace, confidence, and perfect Spanish. He couldn't shake the image of her, nor the way their brief interaction had left an unexpected mark on him. Every time he tried to refocus on the event, his mind wandered back to her. As the evening wore on, Ethan found himself looking for reasons to return to the bar where Maria was working. He'd ask for another drink, hoping it would give him the chance to speak with her again. His curiosity was becoming an obsession, and each time their eyes met, he felt a strange pull toward her. "Another glass of the same, please," Ethan said to her, his tone casual but with an underlying intent. Maria smiled as she took his empty glass, nodding. "Of course, senor," but this time Ethan decided to take a different approach. "So, Maria," he began, his voice warm but probing, "how long have you been working at events like these?" Maria raised an eyebrow, pausing for a moment before answering. "A few months, but it's not my full-time job. I work to make ends meet." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of caution in her words, as if she was used to people not asking about her life unless they had a reason. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you end up working here? You don't seem like the kind of person who's used to being a part of this world." Maria's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I've had to make do with whatever I can," she said quietly. "I've got family back home, and I send whatever I can to support them." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a quiet, resilient determination. Her words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He had always known the hardships of the world. He had built his empire with calculated risk, but he'd never truly understood what it meant to live on the edge, to fight for survival every day. To him, Maria's life seemed both foreign and humbling. "Family is important," Ethan said, trying to shift the conversation to safer ground, but his mind kept circling back to her quiet strength and the hint of struggle she revealed in those few words. Maria was quiet for a moment, then glanced up at him, as if weighing whether to say more. "I'm originally from Mexico," she continued. "My parents came here looking for a better life. We've had to work hard for everything we have, and even then, it's never enough." Ethan found himself leaning in, absorbed by her story. He had always lived in a world where wealth was expected, where the biggest challenge was closing a deal or outperforming competitors. Yet here was Maria, offering him a glimpse into a life he had never imagined. It made him uncomfortable in a way, but also incredibly fascinated. "I didn't know," Ethan said softly. "I mean, I know what people go through, but I guess I never really understood." His voice was tinged with sincerity. Maria smiled, though it wasn't one of joy. "Most people don't, and that's okay. Not everyone has to understand." Ethan paused, the weight of her words lingering in the air between them. "But I want to understand. You're different, Maria," he said without thinking. His words seemed to surprise even him, but they hung in the space between them like a confession. Maria studied him for a moment, her eyes guarded but curious. "I'm not that different," she said, her smile returning, this time more genuine, though still cautious. "I'm just like everyone else, trying to survive." Ethan felt a flicker of something unfamiliar inside him. He had always prided himself on his business acumen, his ability to control every situation. But with Maria, it was as if the world he'd built, the world of deals, power, and influence, seemed small and insignificant. He felt out of his depth, unsure of how to proceed, yet utterly captivated. As the night went on, Ethan's internal conflict deepened. He couldn't shake the way Maria made him feel, compelled, intrigued, even drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. There was a part of him that wanted to help her, to offer her a life that was free of worry and struggle, but another part that reminded him of the vast divide between their worlds. She was a waitress. He was the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. What possible future could there be for someone like her in his world? Yet despite that nagging voice of reason, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, why had she been at the gala? What was she doing here, among all these wealthy strangers, when she clearly didn't belong in their world? The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up in his mind, each one leading him to a deeper curiosity about her. He found himself wanting to know more, needing to understand the story behind her eyes, the quiet strength, the resilience, and the depth that lay beneath her calm exterior. It was more than attraction. It was an urgency to uncover something he couldn't quite define. As the night drew to a close, Ethan realized he wasn't ready to let go of this connection. Not yet. The following days after the gala passed in a blur of meetings, deadlines, and corporate negotiations for Ethan. Yet, his thoughts kept drifting back to Maria, the quiet waitress with the sharp intelligence and the calm strength that seemed to both haunt and captivate him. He found himself reflecting on her words, about her family, her struggles, and the way she carried herself with a quiet dignity. It was an image that lingered in his mind, refusing to let go. His fascination grew deeper with each passing hour. He had tried to focus on the usual high-stakes business deals and luxury investments, but his mind kept returning to one question. Who was Maria Lopez really? And more importantly, why had she affected him so deeply? Determined to understand more, Ethan reached out to her. It wasn't a business-related matter, no, this felt different. He asked if she would be willing to meet him outside the gala setting, away from the glitz and glamour of the event. When she agreed, he felt an unexpected surge of anticipation. Their meeting took place at a quiet cafe in the city, away from the noise of the gala and the distractions of corporate life. Maria arrived dressed simply in a soft sweater and jeans, but it was her presence that spoke volumes. There was an air of confidence, yet something about her posture suggested that she carried a burden she didn't often share. They sat down, and after the initial pleasantries, Ethan leaned in, his voice gentle but probing. Maria, I've been thinking about our conversation. I'd like to know more about your life, if you're comfortable sharing. Maria hesitated for just a moment before giving a small nod. She seemed to weigh his request before speaking, her voice quieter than before. I don't usually talk about it. It's not easy, you know? Ethan didn't press her, simply nodding in understanding. I can't imagine. But if you ever feel like sharing, I'm listening. A flicker of something passed over her face, something that bordered on vulnerability. Maria took a deep breath, as if steeling herself to relive the past. My family. We had to leave Mexico under dangerous circumstances, she began. It wasn't a choice we made lightly. There were threats, violence. My parents decided it was the only option for our safety. We came here hoping for a better future, but it wasn't as easy as we thought. Ethan listened intently, unable to mask the concern in his eyes. He had no idea what it meant to flee for your life, to live in constant fear of what might happen next. His world had always been one of control, of wealth that could smooth over most problems. But here, across the table from him, was someone who had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of the life she had now. I can't even describe the struggles we went through, Maria continued, her voice tightening with emotion. We didn't have papers when we first arrived, so everything was a challenge. Getting jobs, finding a place to live, and dealing with the constant fear of being discovered and deported. We were lucky to get by. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as she spoke, almost as if trying to distance herself from the weight of her words. I started working early to help out. I've done everything from cleaning houses to waiting tables, anything to support my family. But it hasn't been easy, Maria said quietly, her gaze fixed on the table. Ethan was silent for a long time, his mind racing as he processed what she had shared. His life, so different in its opulence and certainty, seemed small in comparison to what Maria had experienced. He had always thought of struggle in terms of business negotiations, market competition, and quarterly profits. But what Maria had endured, what she was still enduring, was something far more raw, something that cut to the heart of human resilience. Maria looked up then, meeting his gaze for the first time since she had begun speaking. I didn't come here looking for sympathy, Ethan, she said, her voice firm once more. I just want to live, to make sure my family has a better chance than we had. Ethan found himself moved by her words, his admiration for her growing by the second. Here was a woman who had faced so many obstacles, yet she still carried herself with grace, determination, and an unshakable drive to improve her life. She was nothing like the pampered, entitled socialites he encountered in his world. Maria was real, authentic, and it was something Ethan found he deeply respected. As she finished her story, silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. Ethan could feel the weight of her experiences hanging in the air, and he realized just how far removed his life had been from the realities Maria faced every single day. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt truly humbled. He had always thought of himself as someone who could fix problems, who could make things happen. But what could he do for Maria? What could someone like him offer someone like her, who had fought and scraped her way through life without ever asking for help? Ethan leaned back in his chair, his thoughts racing. He had come to this meeting hoping to understand Maria better, to satisfy his growing curiosity, but what he realized was far deeper. The more he heard, the more he saw the stark contrast between their lives. He couldn't just walk away from this. Maria had ignited something in him, something that pushed him to reconsider the way he viewed the world and his place in it. It wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about wanting to help, wanting to offer her something more than a fleeting conversation or a moment of sympathy. It was about giving her the chance she deserved. With that realization, a decision began to form in Ethan's mind, one that would change the course of their lives. "Maria," he said quietly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. "I don't know what it is, but I want to stay in touch. I want to help if I can. You deserve more than what life's given you so far. I want to see what I can do." Maria looked at him, surprised but cautious. "What do you mean by that?" Ethan met her gaze, his resolve firm. "Whatever it is, whether it's helping with your career or your family, I want to help. You don't have to accept it, but I want to be there for you." Maria's eyes softened. She wasn't sure what to say at first, but she could see in his eyes that he wasn't offering charity. He was offering something different, something that, for the first time in her life, felt like an opportunity. And for Ethan, the decision had already been made. He wasn't just helping for the sake of it. He was drawn to Maria in a way he couldn't explain, and he wasn't about to let her go. Days after their conversation at the cafe, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between her and Ethan. She had shared parts of her life with him, pieces of herself that she rarely showed anyone, and he had responded with a kindness and sincerity that surprised her. But despite the bond they seemed to be building, something in her held back. Ethan Blackwell was a billionaire, a man who had everything: wealth, power, influence. And Maria? She had very little. The differences between them loomed larger with every passing day. Was he really offering to help? Or was this another attempt by a wealthy man to rescue someone from her place in the world? She couldn't afford to be naive. People like Ethan, with their polished suits and high-rise offices, were often more interested in their own image than in others. Maria had learned long ago to protect herself, to keep her distance from people who seemed too good to be true. And yet something about Ethan made her hesitate, even as she tried to remind herself of the gulf between their worlds. A few days later, as she was finishing her shift at the restaurant, Maria received an unexpected call. It was from Ethan. "Maria," his voice came through the phone, smooth and confident. "I'd like to invite you to dinner if you're free. I'd like to continue our conversation, and I thought we could talk more about some potential business opportunities." Maria's immediate instinct was to decline. She didn't want to be a project for him. She didn't want to be another charity case for a billionaire looking to check a box. But then she paused. There was something about his tone, something genuine that piqued her curiosity. And while she still didn't fully trust him, the thought of learning something new about the world of business was enticing. She had worked hard all her life, but the idea of something beyond surviving, something more, maybe that was worth considering. After a long pause, Maria gave a reluctant sigh. "All right, I'll come. But I need to be clear, Ethan. I'm not interested in any handouts. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to start depending on anyone now." Ethan chuckled lightly on the other end. "I wouldn't dream of offering you a handout. It's simply a dinner, Maria. We'll talk, and you'll decide for yourself if there's anything worth pursuing." With that, they made arrangements for dinner at a quiet, upscale restaurant on the outskirts of the city. A place where the usual buzz of socialites and high rollers was absent, allowing them both the space to talk without interruptions. Ethan had chosen the place deliberately. He wanted the setting to be relaxed, yet comfortable. No power moves, no distractions, just a chance to speak openly. When Maria arrived, she hesitated at the entrance for a moment, trying to shake off the strange mixture of skepticism and curiosity that churned in her gut. Ethan was already there, waiting by the table. As he stood to greet her, She was reminded of just how different their worlds truly were. The sleek lines of his suit, the confident smile, the aura of wealth that clung to him like a second skin. It was a stark contrast to her own simple attire and the weariness in her eyes. But Ethan didn't make her feel out of place. He smiled warmly, offering his hand. "Maria, I'm glad you could make it," she nodded, trying her best to remain composed. "Thanks for inviting me." As they sat down, the initial tension was palpable. Maria couldn't help but study him, wondering what his real intentions were. Why was he so eager to spend time with someone like her? There were 1,000 questions swirling in her head, but she held them back. Instead, she focused on the conversation, hoping to understand more about him. "So, business opportunities, huh?" Maria said, leaning back slightly in her chair. "What exactly do you have in mind?" Ethan's smile deepened, though his eyes were careful, watching her. "I'm not here to pitch you something, Maria. I'm more interested in seeing if you have any interest in learning how the business world works. You've got a sharp mind, and I think you could succeed in more than just serving drinks or waiting tables. I see potential in you." Maria raised an eyebrow, her skepticism returning. "Potential? You think I'd just fit into your world of high-powered deals and boardroom politics?" Ethan's expression softened. "I don't know, but I think you have the drive. You work hard, you're resilient, and you think in ways a lot of people don't. You could be more than just a worker. You could lead if that's what you want." Maria stared at him for a long moment, trying to decipher his words. She was still unsure, but the idea of something more, a future where she wasn't just scraping by, made her heart race. But she wasn't going to give in that easily. "You don't get it," Maria said, her voice a little sharper than she intended. "This isn't about potential. It's about the reality of my life. You can't just snap your fingers and change everything for someone like me. You think people like you, people in your world, understand what it's like to fight every day to make ends meet? To worry about losing everything? I've got people depending on me, my family. It's not that easy." Ethan's face grew serious, and he leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not pretending to understand everything you've been through, Maria, but what I do know is that you don't have to be trapped in that struggle forever. You have the intelligence and the fire. It's just about finding the right opportunity." Maria's chest tightened as she tried to keep the rising emotion in check. She had worked so hard for everything, and the thought of someone, especially someone like Ethan, telling her she could have more felt both empowering and terrifying. They spent the next few hours talking about business, about their worlds, about dreams and limitations. Maria found herself surprised at how much she was willing to open up. She spoke about the dreams she had for her family, the life she imagined for herself, if only she had the chance to rise above the constraints of her current world. The conversation wasn't without its tension. Both of them challenged each other, questioned each other, pushed each other in ways they hadn't anticipated. Sparks of disagreement flared up, but there was an undeniable connection growing between them, a spark that neither could ignore. As the dinner came to a close, the tension between them was still palpable. Neither of them was entirely sure where this connection would lead, but the evening had shifted something in both of them. For Maria, it was a taste of something more, a possibility she had never considered. For Ethan, it was the realization that he couldn't just offer her business advice. He needed to understand her more, to help her in ways he hadn't yet figured out. Before they parted ways, Ethan looked at Maria and said simply, "I'll keep my offer open. Maria, whenever you're ready to explore it, I'll be here." Maria stood, feeling the weight of his words. She wasn't sure if she could take that step, but one thing was certain. Ethan Blackwell had ignited something in her, and for the first time in a long time, Maria wasn't sure what her future would hold, but she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth fighting for. Ethan's thoughts about Maria had become more than a passing fascination. They had consumed him. The more he thought about her, the more questions arose about her life, her family, and the harsh reality she faced daily. He had made the decision to help her, but to do so effectively, he needed to know more. So, he started to dig deeper, reaching out to a few of his connections. He wasn't certain where it would lead, but something inside him told him that Maria's struggles ran much deeper than she'd let on. What he discovered stunned him. Maria's family wasn't just struggling financially. They were in the middle of a dire situation. Her father, a small business owner, had recently become the target of a violent local gang, and their business had been destroyed in an arson attack. Unable to pay back debts, and with little support from the authorities, they were now being threatened with even greater violence. The situation was growing more dangerous with each passing day. The gang had a hold on their neighborhood, an oppressive force that Maria's family had no choice but to endure. Maria had been sending money back to help her parents rebuild, but it wasn't enough. And what was worse was the constant fear that their lives might be at risk. The weight of it all pressed down on Maria like an invisible burden, one she hadn't fully allowed herself to share with anyone. She'd kept it hidden, not wanting to appear weak or vulnerable to Ethan or anyone else. But now Ethan knew, and the realization hit him hard. He had thought Maria's struggles were about survival, about working hard to build a better future. But what she was dealing with was so much more than that. It was life and death. She wasn't just fighting for a better life for herself. She was fighting to protect the people she loved, all while living with the constant fear that it could all be taken away in an instant. As the truth settled in, Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness that he couldn't ignore. The part of him that had once been ruthless in the business world now found itself vulnerable. Vulnerable to Maria's pain, her struggle, and her strength. He realized that he couldn't sit back any longer, that he had to do something. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Ethan. He couldn't stop thinking about Maria, about her family, and about the dangerous path they were on. He knew that it wasn't just about offering her advice or a business opportunity anymore. She needed a way out, an opportunity that would give her family a chance to rebuild their lives and escape the looming threat. Ethan stood at a crossroads. He had the means, the connections, and the power to help her. But he knew that offering her financial help, though important, wouldn't be enough. He needed to offer her a way to truly change her life, not just in the short term, but in the long run. It was then that the idea struck him. Ethan had an upcoming, high-stakes business venture, an expansion of his company into a new market that required both strategic vision and leadership. He had been looking for someone to help lead the initiative, someone with fresh perspectives and a keen sense of business. The idea of involving Maria in the venture had been floating in his mind for a while, but now it felt like the perfect opportunity. Not only would it give her a chance to make her mark in the business world, but it would also offer her the stability and security she so desperately needed. He called Maria late one night, his heart pounding as he dialed her number. She picked up after the second ring, her voice soft but cautious. "Ethan?" "Maria," he said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of the decision he was about to make. "I've been thinking about everything you've shared with me. I want to help, not just with money, but with something that can change your life for good." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then she spoke, her voice quiet. "What do you mean?" "I've got a business venture coming up. It's a big project, and I need someone I can trust, someone with fresh ideas and a lot of heart." "I think that person is you, Maria," Ethan said, his voice firm with conviction. "I want to offer you a role in it, a leadership position. I know you can do it. This isn't about charity. It's about giving you the opportunity to build something real, a chance to take control of your future." Maria was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Ethan could hear her breathing on the other end, steady but hesitant. I don't know what to say," she finally replied, her voice trembling slightly. "This is a huge offer, Ethan. I've never been in a position like this before." Ethan could hear the conflict in her voice, the hesitation, the disbelief. And yet, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that she might say yes. "Maria," he said softly, "you've worked harder than most people I know. You've sacrificed everything for your family. This is your chance to change everything. You don't have to keep fighting to survive. You can thrive. I'm offering you the chance to do that." Maria's voice was barely above a whisper as she responded. "I'm scared, Ethan. I don't want to owe anyone. I don't want to be someone's charity case." Ethan's heart clenched at her words. He understood her fear, her pride. But he also knew that what he was offering wasn't charity. It was an opportunity, a partnership. "You won't owe me anything, Maria. This is about you. It's about what you can accomplish. I believe in you," he said, his words full of conviction. "I'm not asking you to take something from me. I'm asking you to take a chance. For yourself and for your family." There was a long silence, and Ethan could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. Ethan knew it wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And that was all he needed. He wasn't going to push her. The decision had to come from her, in her own time, on her own terms. The next few days were a blur for Maria. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's offer, about what it would mean for her and her family. She knew she couldn't keep living in fear, and the opportunity Ethan was offering her was more than anything she had ever dreamed of. But the thought of accepting his help, of stepping into a world so different from her own, was terrifying. Maria's pride made it hard to imagine accepting anything from Ethan. She had worked so hard, struggled so much, and yet here was this man, offering her a way out. But the tension between them was undeniable. Ethan had crossed a line, offering her not just help, but a chance to truly change her life, and now she had to decide whether she was willing to take that leap or whether she would remain in the world she knew, where survival was all that mattered. The days following Ethan's offer were some of the most turbulent in Maria's life. The decision weighed heavily on her, more than any choice she had ever made. She had always worked hard, fought for every opportunity, and dreamed of a life free of the constant pressures that came with poverty. But this was different. This wasn't just about her dreams anymore. It was about her family, about staying true to herself, and about the uncertain path that Ethan's world represented. She and Ethan had spent more time together since that dinner. Their relationship, once purely professional, had grown deeper. In the beginning, Maria had kept her distance, wary of the fact that she was becoming too involved with someone so different from her. Ethan's world of billion-dollar deals, power lunches, and corporate boardrooms was a far cry from her own life, where survival and family came first. The gap between their worlds felt vast, and Maria had no illusions about how difficult it would be to bridge it. Ethan, for his part, seemed genuinely invested in Maria's well-being. He wasn't just offering her a business opportunity. He was offering her a chance to break free from the life she had known, a chance to live without fear and to make a name for herself in a world she had once thought unreachable. But despite the sincerity behind his offer, Maria couldn't ignore the fact that it came with strings attached, strings that could potentially pull her away from everything she held dear. The tension between them began to build as Maria struggled to reconcile the love she was starting, to feel for Ethan with her desire to protect the life she had built. Ethan had shown her a world she had never dared to dream of, but it was a world that demanded sacrifices, sacrifices she wasn't sure she was willing to make. For Maria, it wasn't just about taking a leap into a new career. It was about leaving behind the family she had worked so hard to support, and about stepping away from everything she had fought for in order to embrace a world that, despite its promises, was full of unknowns. The fear of losing her identity, of abandoning her roots, haunted her every time she considered Ethan's offer. As the days passed, Maria became more withdrawn. The more she saw of Ethan's world, the more she realized how different their lives were, and how difficult it would be to navigate the space between them. The glitz and glamour that surrounded Ethan were so far removed from her daily struggles, and the weight of his expectations felt suffocating at times. She didn't want to be part of a world that viewed people like her as a project to fix or as someone to be saved. She had spent her whole life proving her worth. She didn't want to be reduced to just another success story for someone else to claim. And then there was the reality of her family's situation. Her father's health was deteriorating, and the gang's threats had escalated. Every time she saw her mother's tired eyes or heard the fear in her father's voice when he called her to ask for help, it reminded her of the risk she faced if she left. She had to decide if the promise of a new life, one full of luxury and power, was worth the potential cost of abandoning her family in their time of need. The weight of it all was crushing. Each day felt like a new emotional battle, torn between the dream of a better life and the loyalty she felt for the people who had been there for her through everything. She could feel the pull of both worlds, and neither seemed to offer the peace she longed for. Ethan, too, struggled with the growing distance between them. He could sense Maria's hesitance, the walls she was building around herself as the decision loomed. And it hurt. He had never felt this way about anyone before. He had always been in control, always had the power to influence outcomes, to make decisions with certainty. But with Maria, everything felt different. She challenged him, made him question his own motives, and forced him to see the world in a way he had never done before. He cared for her deeply, and the thought of losing her, or of her turning away from everything he had offered, was unbearable. One evening, as the sun set over the city, casting an orange glow through the windows of his office, Ethan asked Maria to meet him. They were alone in the quiet of his penthouse, the world outside moving at a frenetic pace. But for the first time in their relationship, there was a heavy silence between them. "Maria," Ethan began, his voice soft but steady, "I can see that you're struggling. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I will respect it. But I need you to understand something. This opportunity I'm offering you, it's not just about business. It's about giving you the freedom to make your own choices, to live life on your terms. No more fear, no more worry about what comes next. You can have the life you've always dreamed of, but I can't make that decision for you. I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm asking you to choose yourself." Maria's heart tightened at his words. She had always been independent, always relied on herself to get by. But the more she listened to Ethan, the more she realized that what he was offering wasn't just a career, it was the chance to shape her future. And yet, the thought of leaving her family behind, even for the promise of a better life, felt like betrayal. She had spent years fighting for them, for their well-being. How could she abandon them now when they needed her the most? The emotional conflict was tearing her apart. But then, as she looked into Ethan's eyes, something shifted. She saw the sincerity in his expression, the willingness to stand by her no matter what. She realized that her decision wasn't just about choosing between two worlds. It was about choosing the woman she wanted to become, and the life she wanted to build for herself, with or without Ethan. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, Maria spoke. Her voice was steady, but the emotion behind her words was raw. "I've spent my whole life trying to protect the people I love. I've worked so hard to keep them safe. And I can't just walk away from that. But I also can't keep living in fear. I need to believe that there's more out there for me, more than just surviving, more than just scraping by." Ethan listened intently, his heart racing as she spoke. "I want to take this chance. For me, for my family. I'll find a way to make it work," Maria continued, her eyes shining with determination. "But I need to do it on my own terms. I can't lose myself in the process." Ethan stood up and walked toward her, his expression softening. He reached out, taking her hands in his. "You're not alone in this, Maria. You never have to be." And in that moment, they both understood that this was not just about the offer he had made. It was about their shared journey, about finding a way forward together, despite the challenges that lay ahead. The decision had been made. Maria had chosen a new path, one filled with uncertainty but also with hope. The future was no longer a distant dream. It was something she could now reach for, with the courage to change the course of her life. Their story didn't end with a fairy tale ending. Instead, it was a story of growth, transformation, and the raw reality of choosing between love, family, and the pursuit of a new life. They would face the challenges of their different worlds, but in the end, they would find strength in each other and the choices they had made. And that, for both of them, was enough.